Life, they say, is a journey of trust and love. You build a partnership with someone, believing that together you can face any storm. For years, I felt like I had found my one true person in my wife. We shared dreams, whispered secrets in the dead of night, and built a future that we thought was unshakable. I never imagined that the foundation of my world could crumble in a way I never saw coming. Our relationship was filled with laughter, passion, and a shared vision of the life we would create together. I trusted her completely, never once questioning her loyalty or commitment. But somewhere beneath the surface, things began to change, imperceptibly at first. The late nights at work, the moments when she seemed distant, the guarded way she spoke of her boss. At first, I brushed off these little shifts, convincing myself that everything was fine, that I was just being paranoid. Then came the moment that would change everything, a gut-wrenching moment that would force me to confront a reality I wasn't prepared for. The signs were there all along, hidden in plain sight. But it wasn't until I walked into her office one fateful day that I saw the truth with my own eyes. There, in the very place I had always trusted her to be professional and focused, I caught her in the act, engaged, not just emotionally but physically, with her boss. The betrayal was sharp, cruel, and completely shattering. At first, everything seemed perfect. My wife, Emily, was the kind of woman who could light up a room with her smile. She had a career that she loved, working for a prestigious company in a fast-paced, competitive industry. I admired her ambition and dedication. Her boss, Mark, was a well-respected figure in the company, charismatic, successful, and always the center of attention. I had met him a few times at work events, and he seemed like a decent guy, a mentor to Emily in many ways. I trusted her, and I trusted him. But things began to shift gradually. At first, it was small changes, things I thought were just part of the natural flow of life. Emily started working later and later, coming home long after dinner, sometimes exhausted, sometimes distant. I told myself it was just the demands of her job. She was climbing the corporate ladder after all. I was proud of her, proud of how hard she worked. Yet, as the weeks went by, something felt off. There were moments when I caught her on her phone, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She would suddenly change the subject when I asked her about her day, brushing off my questions with vague answers. When she did mention Mark, it was always in glowing terms. How brilliant he was, how supportive he'd been during a challenging project. I noticed a certain gleam in her eyes when she spoke about him, a level of admiration I couldn't help but feel was deeper than professional respect. Then came the work trips, more frequent, longer in duration. I supported her, of course. She loved her work, and I wanted her to succeed. But the more she traveled, the more I felt the distance growing between us. I'd find myself staring at her empty side of the bed, wondering when I had become an afterthought. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. I told myself that this was just the pressure of her career, that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew that the pieces didn't quite fit together anymore. Something was changing, and I could feel it, though I wasn't sure just how much. I had no idea how much I was about to lose. The first warning signs came quietly, like a distant storm on the horizon, too far away to take seriously at first. It started with the small things I dismissed as coincidence or just the stress of work. But as time passed, I couldn't ignore the mounting feeling that something was wrong. It began one evening when Emily came home later than usual. She had that look on her face, the one I recognized as too tired to talk, but this time it felt different. Usually, she would come home and we'd sit down, share a meal, and talk about our day. But that night, she barely said a word, retreating to the bedroom almost immediately. I brushed it off, telling myself she had just had a long day, but the next few days followed a similar pattern. She started spending even more time at the office, working late into the night, sometimes not even coming home until after midnight. When I asked her about it, she would give me a half-hearted excuse. There's a deadline, or I need to prepare for an important presentation. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But deep down, a voice inside me whispered that there was more to it. It wasn't just the late hours that set off alarms. It was the little details, the changes in her behavior that I couldn't ignore anymore. Her phone became an object of secrecy. She was always on it. But whenever I entered a room, she'd quickly put it down or hide the screen. Once, I tried to check her phone, pretending I was looking for something, but it was locked with a password, one she had never used before. The excuse was simple. I just don't want anyone else snooping around. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we had always been open with each other, and she had every right to her privacy. But then came the emails. I had no intention of snooping. I swear I didn't. But one night, when she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, an email notification popped up. It was from her boss, Mark. At first, I thought nothing of it until I saw the subject line. Can't wait to see you tonight. The blood drained from my face as I read it again. It wasn't a work-related email. The tone was casual, intimate even. I scrolled down, unable to stop myself. The message wasn't long, but the words cut deep. I've been thinking about you all day. Let's grab dinner. Just the two of us. I miss you. I couldn't breathe. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. The room seemed to spin. For the first time, I wonder if I'd been blind to something far darker than I could have ever imagined. I closed the laptop quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. My first instinct was to confront her, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe it was just a joke, a harmless flirtation. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But deep down I knew something had changed. Emily was no longer the woman I had married. And Mark, the man I had trusted as a colleague, was now a threat I hadn't seen coming. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of my suspicions crushed me. I had to know the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The email lingered in my mind, gnawing at me like a hidden wound. Every moment I spent with Emily felt like I was standing in the shadow of a truth I couldn't avoid much longer. But despite my growing suspicions, I still loved her. I wanted to believe that there was a reasonable explanation, that my doubts were unfounded. Maybe it was my own insecurities playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just paranoid. But as the days went by, the distance between us only grew. Emily became colder, more elusive. She spent longer hours at the office and avoided any meaningful conversations. When we did talk, it was surface level at best, her answers robotic, her eyes distant. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced with a coolness I couldn't explain. The physical distance between us had always been a slow burn, but now the emotional gap felt insurmountable. One evening, everything changed. I had come home early from work, hoping to catch a rare moment where we could reconnect. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made my heart beat a little faster. Emily's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't home. I checked her phone, but there were no messages, no signs of where she had gone. I called her twice, but got no answer. I knew in my gut that something was wrong. When I finally heard her car pulling up an hour later, I stepped out onto the porch, trying to act casual, like everything was normal. But the moment she stepped out of the car, something about her was different. She looked disheveled, almost flustered, her eyes not meeting mine. "Where were you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady but laced with tension I couldn't hide. Her gaze flickered to the ground, and she hesitated before replying, "Just out for a walk. Needed some fresh air." Her answer was vague, not the kind of response I would expect from her. But it wasn't the answer that set me off. It was the way she said it. There was something about the lie that felt too rehearsed, too calculated. And then I saw it. Her lipstick was smeared just slightly, but enough for me to notice. The smell of perfume, a fragrance I didn't recognize, hung in the air. It was a scent I hadn't smelled on her before. I knew the truth was crashing down on me, and there was no escaping it. I walked toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on, Emily?" My voice trembled, a mix of anger and heartbreak. "What's really going on?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. It was like she was trying to hold back a storm, but her guilt was too strong. Then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words sliced through me like a knife. "Mark and I were engaged." I froze. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. My mind raced, replaying every moment I had brushed off as innocent. The late nights, the secrecy, the way she'd talk about him like he was her world. It all made sense now, in the worst way possible. Engaged! My voice cracked. You're engaged to him? To Mark. Her eyes welled up with tears, but there was no apology in them. Just the same cold, distant look that had become all too familiar. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I love him, and I can't help it. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand why. Why had she betrayed me so completely? Why had she let me live in the dark while she carried on with this affair? But instead, I stood there numb, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what I was hearing. The woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, was now engaged to another man, her boss, the man I had once respected. I looked at her, at the woman I thought I knew, and felt nothing but a deep, crushing emptiness. The world I had built with her, the love I believed in, was now shattered. And in that moment, I realized that nothing, not a single thing, would ever be the same again. Why didn't you just tell me? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening, a reflection of the brokenness that now defined our relationship. And just like that, the woman I had once called my wife was lost to me. The betrayal didn't stop with just words. It wasn't just a confession of her engagement to Mark. It was the way it played out in front of the world, the way my pain was laid bare for everyone to see. That weekend, there was a company event at a fancy downtown venue. It was supposed to be a gala to celebrate the company's annual achievements, a night of glitz and glamour. I had planned to stay home. After everything that happened, I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her with him, acting like nothing had changed. But Emily insisted. She begged me to come, said it would be a good opportunity to talk and sort things out. The last thing I wanted was to sit in a room full of strangers, pretending everything was fine while the reality of my life was crashing down around me. But I agreed, out of some misguided hope that we could somehow salvage what was left of our marriage, or at least have a conversation without the tension that had consumed our home in recent days. When I arrived at the venue, the sight of Emily and Mark together was enough to send a cold wave of nausea through my stomach. They were standing near the bar, laughing, leaning in close as if they had forgotten I was even in the room. The ease between them was undeniable. The way she touched his arm, the way he smiled at her with a look I had never seen directed at me. It was a look of complete ownership. I told myself I would be calm. I would walk away, leave the event without causing a scene. But I couldn't. I needed to know the full truth. I needed to face the reality of what had happened to the woman I thought I knew. As I stood by the entrance, watching them from a distance, Emily caught my eye. Her expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of guilt before the mask of professionalism returned. Mark, however, noticed me too, and his smile deepened into something smug, almost predatory. He made no effort to hide his arrogance. In that moment, I realized that they were no longer hiding anything. They were proud of their relationship, their betrayal. And the worst part? They didn't even care about the damage it was causing. I made my way toward them, my steps deliberate, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Emily's face flushed as I approached, and for a moment, I saw the woman I once loved, the one who had stood by me through everything, the one I believed was loyal. But that woman was gone. "Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but the words cut through the air like a knife. "Is this really how it ends? In front of all these people?" Mark, sensing the tension, straightened up and flashed a smug smile. "Actually, it's just beginning," he said with a casual, almost mocking tone. "We're getting married, and I think it's time everyone knew the truth." The words were like a slap in the face. I felt the blood rush to my head, my vision narrowing. Emily didn't look at me. She couldn't even meet my eyes. Instead, she stood there, awkwardly clutching her drink, her gaze focused on the floor. There, in front of the people I had known for years, her co-workers, my friends, strangers who didn't deserve to witness this. She had made her choice clear. It wasn't just about Mark and her secret affair anymore. She had chosen him, and now she was openly flaunting it. letting everyone see what had been hidden behind closed doors. It wasn't just the infidelity that stung. It was a public humiliation, the complete disregard for the pain I was feeling. The fact that she could stand there, so nonchalant, while my heart shattered in front of an entire room of people, was the moment I realized just how far gone we were. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a fool, standing alone in a room full of people who now knew I had been played for a fool. Without a word, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, not even once. I knew then that this wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of a chapter one would never get back. In the days that followed, the weight of what had happened settled on me like a suffocating blanket. I went through the motions, work, eating, sleeping. But everything felt hollow. The house felt empty without her, even though she was no longer a part of it in any real way. I could still hear the echoes of her laughter in the walls, the way she would hum in the kitchen as she cooked dinner. Now it was all gone. The worst part wasn't just a loss of Emily. It was a loss of my sense of self. Who was I without her? How had I let myself become so blind to the cracks in our relationship? The man I had trusted with my heart had become a stranger, and the woman I had loved had turned into someone I couldn't even recognize. Friends and family started reaching out, but it was hard to face them. I couldn't tell them the whole truth without feeling like I was admitting failure. Failing at love, at marriage, at seeing the truth. Some of them knew or had suspected, but no one had ever said anything. It was as if they, too, had been complicit in the charade. Emily moved out the following week, taking only a few things. She never once asked to explain herself beyond the brief conversation at the gala. It was as if her decision had been made long before I'd even walked into that room. As I watched her leave, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The pain was still there, of course, but there was a quiet strength growing inside me, one that told me this was just the beginning of something new, something better. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow myself to be betrayed again. And for the first time in a long time, I began to think about rebuilding not just my life, but my very sense of who I was. Healing didn't happen overnight. At first, it felt like I was walking through a fog, each day blending into the next without clarity. There were moments when I'd be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, wrestling with the memories of everything that had been shattered. The betrayal echoed in my mind, over and over again, like a song I couldn't unhear. But slowly, I began to realize that I didn't have to stay stuck in the pain. I didn't have to define myself by what had been taken from me. I sought therapy, something I never thought I'd need, but it was the best decision I could have made. Talking about the hurt, the anger, the feelings of humiliation, it was like lifting weights off my chest one word at a time. I learned that it wasn't my fault. Emily's choices weren't reflections of my worth or my love. They were reflections of her own journey, one that had veered in a direction I couldn't follow. I started spending more time with my friends, people who supported me through the toughest days. They reminded me of who I was before Emily, before betrayal, and helped me reconnect with the person I had almost lost sight of. I rediscovered old hobbies, things I had abandoned when I had gotten lost in the rhythm of marriage and work. I began to do things for me again, not for anyone else. Slowly, the light that had once felt so distant started to feel within reach. The road to healing was long, and it wasn't always linear, but with each step forward, I felt stronger. I began to realize that my worth wasn't tied to the love of someone else, and that was the most powerful realization of all. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. As time passed, the pain of betrayal became a distant memory, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and self-worth. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about growing from the experience and reclaiming your life. Emily's choice to walk away was hers, but it no longer defined me. I was learning to trust again, not just in others, but in myself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I felt a spark of hope. I knew that the journey ahead would be mine to write, and this time, I would be the one holding the pen.